So welcome to Effective Prompting and Error Correction for Paraprofessionals. My name is Jacqueline Carabinas, and I'm joined by my colleague, Marissa Hooper. We both work for Demonstrated Success, and we are excited to do this work with paras because we know that all of you are always asking for training and looking for training, and you often don't get included in the training that is in your schools. I'm the Director of Literacy here at Demonstrated Success, and I'll let Marissa introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Marissa. I'm the school support and math specialist here at Demonstrated Success. I was a middle school math teacher before this. I kind of feel like putting this together with Jacqueline was great because we were able to see firsthand kind of what we thought you all needed. So we're very excited to be with you today.
Yeah, I agree, Marissa. It's fun to put it together and try to put into words what we feel like was worked in the classroom as far as prompting. So I enjoy it. So I hope you all enjoy it as well. So we're going to just start off with a poll. And actually, before we dive in, I just want to let everyone know that we do have the chat box open. We encourage you to use the chat to share questions as they come to mind or any reactions or responses you're having as we work together today. So feel free to use that chat box. I'll keep an eye on it so that as we find times that are good to pause and refer to the questions in the chat box or anything else, we can do that. So please feel free to use that. And then right now I'm going to launch a poll, which will show up on your screen. And this poll is just asking, what are your barriers to providing support? And so basically what we're looking to collect here is just from the entire group, what kind of barriers do you feel as a paraprofessional in your school when you're providing support to students? And you should know you can select more than one. This is set up that, if there are more than one, if there is more than one option that you feel describes your experience, you're welcome to choose that.
It's also anonymous, just in case you were wondering. We won't know who says what.
Also a good point. All right, so I know you all can't see, but on my screen I can see the bar graphs growing and moving around as people share their responses. And when I end the poll, you'll be able to see. So if you're curious, you will be able to see. We have about 80% participation so far, so I'll just give it another moment. And then I'll let you know what you need to see. Lori, I see you have your hand raised. I was just wondering if you have a question or if you needed some help with something, you can throw it in the chat box and I can help you out. All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, no worries. You don't have to apologize, Lori. It's all good. I'm just going to wait. We have a few more people. I know sometimes people are logging in and then kind of running around multitasking before they get started. So I'll give the poll another 30 seconds if you're just settling and joining. Oh, I see. Thank you. And some of you are in groups. So that may also account for under 100% participation, which is no problem. You can all add your thoughts. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this. And I'm going to share so that you can all see. All right, did it pop up on your screen, the share? Yes, excellent. Thank you. I'm always double checking what participants can see. I appreciate it. So I'll just kind of scroll through and take a look at the options here. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like to you. You may also be able to scroll through so that you can see. So far, unclear how much support to provide is pretty high, as is student resistance. And it's interesting that the unclear on how much support to provide is high because that is something that Marissa and I talked about a lot as we were designing this webinar for you today, was talking about the line. Where is the line? And we'll talk about that a little today. And of course, the answer is it depends, but we'll take a look and see. Yeah, just a scattering of all of these. I imagine IEP goals not being shared with you or specifically shared with you. There a number of people chose that one. I imagine that is an issue for those as for some people as well. Okay, great. So thanks for sharing that. And, you all can take a look through just to kind of see what your colleagues also, how they answered, and see that a lot of you had some barriers in common for sure. So we're going to move through just an introduction to understanding prompting and error correction. Then we're going to move through a section about just providing some tools for you to help equip you for some of this work, and also give you the kind of tools that maybe you wish you had access to, but you don't always get to know or get access to because of your role at the school and when you're not a part of professional development days and things like that. We'll talk through some types of support, give you some specific ELA math and ELA scenarios, and then we will wrap up. So we'll start with this thought about committing mistakes. I'll give you a moment to read it on your own, and then I'll read it aloud. While no one likes to commit mistakes, especially publicly, it's in the best interests of schools, teachers, and students to make peace with them or even welcome them. And something we talk about later is how if this is a belief that you hold as a paraprofessional, it can be challenging because you get to be a part of a wide range of classroom environments. And you may have some classroom environments that welcome mistakes, and you may have some that don't. And so that can be a challenge if that's a part of your belief system. So just thinking in terms of these words, error versus mistake, Marissa and I talked at length about this, and we narrowed this down to understanding that an error is a misunderstanding of a skill or concept of which the learner does not yet have the knowledge. So if you gave them the same kind of problem, they would continue to get it wrong, likely. They don't yet have the knowledge to be successful with whatever the problem, the task, the question is. Whereas a mistake involves incorrect application of a skill in which the learner does have the knowledge to correct themselves. So if you gave them the same kind of problem, they're likely to get it correct. And even this has some nuance. And she and I discussed that thinking about when the learner does have the knowledge, you don't always have access to that data as a paraprofessional, and you're also not in the classroom with them, with students all day long. So sometimes it's hard to even know how much something has been taught if students, quote unquote, should know something. So that can be a challenge. But either way, we can think about how this impacts our students. So this is one of my favorite books. I recommend it if you're looking for a new nonfiction book. And it is mostly about embarrassment in schools. But this book is all about the emotional underlife of learning and how stigma and embarrassment impact not just students, but impact us as adults too in our process of learning. And the author, Tom Newkirk, says, "I'm absolutely convinced that embarrassment is not only the true enemy of learning, but of so many other actions we could take to better ourselves." And we wanted to acknowledge that the population of students that you all are working with in schools are likely students that are experiencing or will at some point experience feeling some level of embarrassment or shame or stigma for whatever challenges or difficulties that they're having. And so naming that is really important because this is very, keeping in mind the specific students that you work with and the emotions that they may have with regards to learning is really important here. So we know that we want students to learn from their errors. So how does that work? Well, in its simplest way, we need students to recognize the error and understand the underlying problem, and then correct the error. And they need support. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the error. However, where's the line? So error corrections include some nuanced decision making, and nuanced decision making requires information, and you can only use information that you have. So like on the barriers, the barrier poll, a lot of you mentioned things like not knowing the expectation or unsure what students at that grade level should be able to do, or all sorts of things. And that correcting a student, it requires us to consider the context of the situation, the student profile, the task at hand, and research, meaning academic research about how students learn and how we can learn from feedback, but also researching the student. If we know from researching a student that feedback in a small group setting embarrasses them, we're not going to do that. It doesn't matter if they need to be corrected or not. And we also know that sometimes corrections can have the impact of silencing learners, which is always something that to have in mind, because we want to find that sweet spot with correcting students or redirecting them so that they don't start to feel any stigma from making mistakes. That just becomes a part of learning. But also, you as a paraeducator, you can't always control the environment that has been established in the classroom. I'm sure some of you have been in classrooms where that is a part of the culture, and in other classrooms, it's never discussed, it's never talked about, and so it creates very different experiences where mistakes are concerned. But you can control different ways you respond and prompt, and so hopefully you can learn some strategies here today. So we want to think through prompting and error correcting carefully, because we want students to be able to think for themselves and engage cognitively. We want them to be able to continue learning and fill in gaps as we move along. And so, we don't want them to have missed opportunities or build dependence on memorization and things like that. We want to prompt to move students forward in learning versus hindering their ability to do these things. So some of the things that we can do is think through how do we can give adequate feedback. So what does that look like? And we'll talk through some examples. And the feedback is adapted to the context or the student. Another thing we can do is help struggling students create a counter narrative. So what I mean by that is if they're continually engaging in negative self-talk, part of the work is talking with students and helping them reframe their thinking about themselves and create a new narrative about who they are as a learner, from someone that makes a lot of mistakes to reframe as maybe someone that is curious about how something could go correctly or not, or why something was wrong. And also thinking that we want to provide support, but again, here's that line: we don't want to over scaffold, because we've all worked with students who have developed learned helplessness and they're just waiting to be told what to do. They're just waiting for you to read the directions. They're waiting for you to, send them up to the desk to get materials or whatever it may be. And so we can help students understand why certain answers are correct, how and why others might be incorrect. We can provide representations and alternate methods and help explain concepts in different ways so that students can move forward in their learning. That because the ultimate goal is, yes, we do want to deepen their understanding of the skill or the topic, but we want to build independence and help students engage in that productive struggle where we're not over scaffolding, so we're hand holding through the task, but we are giving them just enough prompting so that they can learn to work through some of these things on your own.
Okay, so next we're just going to go into a little bit about equipping yourself. So we wanted to point out basically, a lot of what can help you in the classroom with the prompting and knowing your students. But we realized how much that is. And really, we just wanted to point out here that, paraprofessionals don't have the same trainings always as certified teachers. I know some paras used to be certified teachers and then they go into that para role, but others don't. And yet there's a lot to know. You're constantly, some of you might be going to different classrooms where there are different expectations and different standards. And some of you might be working with multiple students. So that's multiple IEPs or multiple kind of their different learning styles that you have to juggle. And we just want to point out that we understand like how difficult sometimes it can be to know all this information, and yet you're expected to. So we just wanted to point out basically some things that can help you is knowing the standards in which the grade level and content area that you're in and the lesson goals of that the teacher has created. any tools, routines, or classroom procedures that your different classrooms have. And then, of course, knowing your students, student resistance was one of those big answers in the poll earlier. And that I think is one of the hardest struggles, is something that you feel is so out of your sorry, I'm blanking on the word, but it's so out of, like, you're not able to control it, out of your control. So really knowing their interests, IEP goals, modifications and supports, and their personalities, we hope can help you a little bit in trying to relieve that resistance a little bit. So in the different classrooms that you're in, your teachers create their either learning targets, learning objectives, I can statements, success criteria, whatever they have in their classroom. Um, it's important to know those. It's also nice to know those before the actual day of. So putting it out there to meet with teachers or your case managers when you can, to kind of get an idea of what students are going to be learning. And then knowing those grade level standards and terminology, we're not going to go through them, but we did link them here. So when you get a copy of this slide deck in your email, you will get a copy if you ever want to take a look at them. We know there's so many, but it can definitely help you with that prompting and error correction about what Jacqueline said earlier, of what students, that line of like what you think they know, what they should already know, that mistake versus error. So these are, we linked the NGSS standards here for science. So this allows you to pick a grade span and a disciplinary core idea, and really getting into the standards that you can look through. So this is just a screenshot of the website and how you can navigate it. And then, just so you know, if like you're ever not familiar with the terminology, the disciplinary core ideas are those kind of big pieces in science that your students are going to be learning. And then as you click into them, they'll get a little more specific. And this is a domain progression for math. This actually comes from the Annie Wallace from the NHED. So all the way from kindergarten to high school, it shows you how the domains progress throughout the grade levels. So just so you can see where something's going, or maybe if you're trying to help a student like backtrack a little bit about trying to fill in some gaps, it can help you go revisit some skills or standards that you're trying to help your student with. So this is just a domain progression for you. And then, of course, we have those 8 standards of mathematical practice in the math classrooms. So just anytime you're working with a student to try to get students to, persevere in problem solving and use modeling with mathematics, or using appropriate tools, anytime if you're working with them independently or in the classroom, that you can get them to practice.
And I'm just going to jump in really quick, Marissa, because I think that one of the things that is helpful for me, I mean, Marissa is the math mind. Marissa's math and specialty, and I'm the ELA in ELA specialty. And so when I think of the standards of mathematical practice, that's the one thing for math that I can hang on to that will be the same K to 12. So if I work with a second grader, I work with an eighth grader, these mathematical practices are going to be integrated into classrooms. So it's just kind of something that can anchor me to math instruction.
And then, so those domains that I was talking about, the gray part on the top of the standards, for instance, this one says the number system, that's the domain. And then what you see in bold are called clusters. And basically within each cluster it could be one or a group of standards that make each cluster. So sometimes clusters are kind of that like end of unit assessment that teachers want to put all their knowledge, or sorry, all the skills that they taught and put together. And if you ever are able to look at how your students do on the New Hampshire SAS, it reports out on clusters. So you could get to see that for your specific kids. And then we have ELA. And that is the domains actually and the clusters for ELA are the same, K to 12, which is awesome. And then the standards are what change, but they're standards that grow each year. And I know Jacqueline can talk to them a little more than I can. But it's super helpful, especially if you're working in multiple grade levels and helping kids, and if you're moving with kids as well. And then for history and social studies and science, there are some standards for reading and writing for the Common Core. And just again here, the reading standards for literature, that's our domain. Whatever's in gray here, the key ideas and details and craft and structure, those are our clusters. And then within those are our standards. So along with standards, in that poll, some of us may not get, our IEP goals shared with us, or maybe they're not super helpful. I know sometimes IEP goals are written for like a specific universal assessment of student scoring, and they can be very vague. So knowing our IEP goals is super helpful, and especially like whatever, maybe there's a specific prompt given. And if you have any questions, reaching out to your case managers, making sure that you know exactly how to help your kids, and they could have multiple goals, they could have one goal. So and then just knowing the classroom routines and procedures, like Jacqueline was saying earlier, creating a classroom environment where mistakes are welcome, is something that's not really in your control. Those expectations, we were looking at this maneuvering the middle, and looking at this opening routine, and I know we were like, we would not do this in our classrooms. So, the classroom environments may be different than where you're going, throughout the day, but it is important to know them, and whether you agree or not, to help your students follow, whatever classroom expectations that the teacher sets. And then whenever you can, putting out there that, mistakes are very much welcome and great to make. And then lastly is just knowing the tools in your classroom. That's for you and your students. Later in the prompting, we're going to talk about pick 3 before me. One of them are the tools. So this is just some math examples about what could possibly be in the classroom that can help you and your student. And then we also have some ELA examples on the next slide, that you can also use as well. So if you're not sure of if your classroom has these, or maybe what some of them are, definitely reach out to your classroom teacher, or case manager, and just see what's available to your students, because the list could be longer or shorter. So definitely encourage you to reach out and get to know what's in your classrooms.
Thanks, Marissa. And I see a lot of great questions. I always love a webinar where the chat box is flowing. It's, for some people, it's distracting, but for me, I love it because it's just like being in person. So keep it coming. I do see the conversation going on, and so I'm hanging on to that, where for a time when it fits in really well. So just letting you know that I see it, and we can definitely talk more about that. So we can think through types of prompts, and you probably have, if you've seen IEPs or IEP goals, if you've been, if that information's been shared with you, you've probably seen a wide range of prompts, everything from the physical prompts to visual. And some students need physical prompts. It's written into their IEP, and other students may just need some verbal cues or gestural cues or modeling. And so just thinking through this hierarchy, thinking through visual, verbal, gestural, model, and physical. And I almost don't think of this as much of a hierarchy as it is kind of a menu. I think of those first three as pretty similar. It probably would depend on the learner and what they needed in that situation. Do you need to say something, a word or a phrase to help the child move on to the next step of what they're doing or get started? Is it a student that responds to a menu of icons or pictures so that they know what's happening next or what they should be doing? And the gesture, I see as something that, again, it has to do with the type of student and what they're responding to, from whether you're providing anything in this hierarchy. So one of the most broad ways that we can promote independence through questioning as a prompt, well, I call it broad because it can really work across any class and any subject. And so we kind of wrote these in a very general way. And so hoping that you can use these as a resource for you as you learn different ways to prompt through questioning with students and sort of tweaking the question to match, whatever content you're learning. So, we can ask clarifying questions to try to understand more or prompt the student to dig for more understanding. Helping them zoom in on key ideas. If there's a lot of information and they're having a hard time finding where to start with directions, or they've read a passage and they're not sure where to start with answering a question or joining a conversation, thinking, zooming in, what seems to be the most important here? Breaking down problems. Some students need us to break them down for them. Well, for a lot of students, that's part of that's part of the accommodations that we're giving them. That when we have they have a problem or a task or something that they're working on, that we will break it down for them. Sometimes ahead of time. Sometimes we'll do it in the moment. Encouraging visualization is a really helpful one across the board. I was talking with a kindergarten teacher the other day, and she had this theory that because kids aren't running around outside and pretending and playing pretend as much as they used to, that visualization is something that she feels like she's had to explicitly teach or invite students to do. And I just thought that was really interesting. So sometimes that process of visualizing, whether it's visualizing what we read, instructions, the chapter, the word problem, whatever it is, to really try to see that in our minds. Some students do really well with working with a partner. Some want to work with a partner, but aren't able to initiate that on their own yet, or don't always feel comfortable. And so sometimes just pairing students up or directing them to help each other is a good way to go. Even just prompting with the question of, are there other ways to do this? If they're getting frustrated with the approach that they're taking. I think this is a really good one for when students are having a hard time understanding or visualizing, trying to think, does this sound like anything, from your own life? Does this sound like anything that you've heard before? Is another way to put that, to really try to find out what kind of understanding the student might have. And even checking in, and I feel like this is a common one. Sometimes we'll check in with students and we'll say, how's it going? Do you need any help? And a lot of times, there's no response, or it's, no, or they, whatever, they don't want help, they don't answer. But I sometimes asking, tell me what you've done so far. Or just, explain what you're doing right now, or, just kind of prompting to find out their current understanding of what they're doing, and explain how they got there is a good way to help them find next steps versus asking, do you need help? Providing immediate feedback. This one, I would say this could accompany any prompt anywhere. I noticed that you blank. Can you say more about that? And this is a very general questioning strategy, because it could be something correct, it could be something incorrect, it could be positive, it could not be, it could be anything. But it just kind of brings attention to something to help the student stop and think, and explain. And can you say more about that is an invitation for a student to elaborate a bit if they're willing. And again, this is like the checking for understanding is just asking, okay, so you did this problem. This went really well. Great. What strategies did you use? Reflecting on what went well so that you can use that as you move forward. And I won't read all of these, but we just wanted to give you kind of like a collection of questions that you might be able to choose from, like a menu, really. This whole slide deck will be a resource that you can take and refer to. That way you don't have to remember all of this, or you don't have to remember everything. That way, if you feel like any of these questions might help you, you can take those with you into the classroom. And so we keep talking about the line. And so the line, it really depends on the student, right? It depends on the context. And so sometimes we have to think about where the student may be, like their starting point for what their needs are. And so looking at this level one independent, meaning a student can usually get started on their own. Maybe they get stuck along the way, or they just need a little nudge here and there, all the way to a student that needs walked through things step by step for whatever reason, whether it be resistance or whether it be the current challenges or struggles that they have. But the idea is to sort of think through what you know about the student, and then that becomes your gauge. And so once you get to know a student, if you realize, really they just need some time, they really just need some wait time, maybe they need me to read the question or clarify the task, and then I can just sit quietly, or I can move away and come back. Sometimes that's enough. Marissa mentioned earlier the try three before me, encouraging students to try three resources, whether it could be ask a classmate, is there a poster on the wall? Do they need to go get a tool? Was something posted in Google Classroom that is going to help them, that kind of thing. Moving through this partially dependent. So this is when students are probably going to need a little bit more support as you're moving through. It might be more than just one cue to get them started. And again, it's a lot of clarification sometimes, the redirect, moving all the way to heavier support and more prompts, and even moving from prompts to just the direct step-by-step. So one way to think about this is just to think, okay, think about a student you're working with and where is the starting point for them? And then you can kind of like a dial, right? You're kind of like turning it up and turning it down and finding that line. It is a skill, and I think it's something that the outside world will never understand, how much paras have to think on the spot and really like turn that dial up and down to support students. So we see you. So we're going to move into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Yes. 10 minutes. And I just want you to think through the students you currently support, and think what types of prompts or questions could you use tomorrow, and how might you adjust them to the context or needs of the student. So thinking about a line of questioning, or anything from the visual to gestural prompts and physical prompts, if that's been included in your student's IEP. So just kind of a conversation about the kind of prompting or cueing that is either working for you or something you've heard that you might try so far. And then we'll come back together and give some very specific ELA and math examples, so that you can just get some very specific scenarios. Thank you, Lori. I see your note about your breakout. So, and Marissa, I actually think you need to make the breakouts, because unless you want to make me the host.
I'm working, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I might have to switch for you to be the host.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because I cannot find it.
And you know what? This might be a good time to just pause while Marissa's shifting host over to me, so that we can move into breakouts and have this conversation together. There was a conversation about, not, I mean, essentially not being supported in terms of what students need. So you are the para, you are with students, you can tell that if they are not responding to the materials that are provided to them, whether it be the grade, the level of text, the kind of task that it is, like Sarah mentioned, having a ninth grader at a first grade level. And both times. So I know that one of you said, I think it was Amber said, you brought it up to the case manager and nothing changed. That's really frustrating because that's sort of that's your line of communication, right? And Sarah, I know you mentioned communicating this as well. I think that it could be frustrating because you see exactly maybe not exactly what kids need, but you can see what's not working. And really, this really needs to be a collaboration of the teacher, the special educator, the student, and the para. And that's where I think sometimes things fall apart because I'm curious to know, what kind of adjustments is the classroom teacher making, or is the classroom teacher depending on the special education teacher, the case manager, or is the classroom teacher depending on you, the parent? It's not your responsibility to locate or create materials. So there's no real answer to that, but it's definitely a real thing. So thank you for bringing that to the surface because I think that this is a common issue. And Amber mentioning too about the teacher doesn't establish classroom expectations. Then what? I think in the name of you doing what's best for the student you're working with and helping them be successful, you may end up having to establish some expectations in your working relationship. And sometimes that can be challenging too. So, no black and white answers there. Yeah, I agree, Kristen. A lack of talk, a lack of conversation between this whole team. Figuring out a way to keep communication flowing from team meetings that you may not be at, IEP meetings that you may not be at, and getting the right information to you, and you again getting the information back is a big problem. And so, continuing to share that with case managers and other administrators, I think that's also a helpful way to go. Because that way you can engage with multiple people in the school to figure out how you can do what's best for that student. All right, how we do, Marissa? Are we there?
You are the host.
Okay. Let's see. I still do not have the option for breakouts, so I'm not sure what's going on. So you know what? We might have to shift gears because for some reason Zoom is just not letting me choose breakout rooms at all. Not even in the menu. That's okay.
I'm glad it's not just me.
Yeah, I don't know. And you know what? When it comes to technology, I don't overanalyze it.
Yeah.
We really wanted to use breakout rooms. It's not letting us, so we're just gonna move forward. So can we just use the chat box? Think through the students you currently support. What might you be able to use tomorrow in terms of prompts or questioning, and how might that work in your context? And I'll give you some time to both add to the chat box, but also to scroll through and read what other people are writing. So I know some of you are still adding, but I'll just start to um, read through some of the things I'm seeing here. Yeah, the three before me, it's really great for some students. And I think that you'll know, right? I mean, it's what is it, February? It's February. So if you've been working with students all year, you already kind of know like that could backfire, or nope, that is kind of exactly what they need. So it can help with that learned helplessness, but can also help with students who are stuck. They're just stuck. And sometimes they forget that they have options in a classroom. They can get up and go find something or ask someone, sort of taking ownership of their learning. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Emily. Emily's sharing that, asking, explain what you've done so far versus do you need help? And do you feel stuck anywhere? It's a very specific question. Amber notes that she's using a lot of visual prompts. And so, Amber, what I'm wondering is that like a visual menu that's been provided to you from the case manager that's specifically for that student? Great, thank you. Yeah, Heather, I agree. Heather's talking about modeling behavior, doing math problems right beside them. I think that's really great because you can share it's a think aloud, right? Whether you're reading and you're reading a question or reading directions or you're talking yourself through a problem, being really metacognitive about your own process and doing that out loud is a really good model for students. They can hear you, sort of talk through or questions that you might have or talk through your process. It's a really great model for them. And I see a few about reflection, letting them know it's a no judgment zone. um, and someone wrote earlier, oh, the positive reinforcement. Yeah, I think for a lot of students, it's reclaiming that narrative, reclaiming that narrative of who they are as learners, what their capacity is as learners. A lot of students that you're working with have been receiving messages along the way that maybe they aren't enough. And so that's really unfortunate. And at the same time, we can help them, we can model the language of positive self-talk and reclaiming that narrative and try to help them take the power back a little bit. Yeah, I agree, Jolene. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that. I'm probably mispronouncing your name, but drawing a picture is so helpful. I think my fifth grade daughter still is, she'll constantly draw pictures in boxes. And, I always feel like by fifth grade, they start not doing the pictures anymore. I don't know why. I don't know if they feel like they shouldn't or, it's something they would do when they were younger, but drawing a picture forever. I still draw pictures, I think. I know Karen talking about paras should be included in IEP meetings. I remember it was probably my first year of teaching, and I was going to an IEP meeting and I was just blown away. I was floored. I didn't understand how the para who was with the particular student all day, 6.5 hours, one-on-one para, was not going to be at the IEP meeting. I think that was my first red flag that the system is not set up um, to include paras in the way they need to be. Oh, that's great, Leanne. All that encouragement. All right. You're also smart. This is great. All right. I know that time is ticking, so I'm going to head back. Oh, I went too far. And all right. So we're going to talk about some specific ELA and math scenarios that come up with prompting. Or come up where prompts may be needed. That's a better way to say it, I think. And so hopefully, I know that all of you work in a wide range of schools, a wide range of contexts, wide range of students, but these are some really common ones that Marissa and I felt like might be helpful to give some specifics. So one of the things is, reading a word or spelling a word. So, a student gets to a word, they're stuck. What do? Do you tell them the word and move on? They're spelling a word, they ask you, how do you spell, business? Do you tell them or not? So that's something that comes up a lot. And so thinking about some different things that you can try. So one thing you can try when a student is trying to read a word and they're not quite getting the word, or they're trying to spell it and they're going through the sounds, but they're not getting them quite right. You can tell them to flip the vowel. Some of you may have been in a classroom where they have Flippy the dolphin. I don't think I've seen Flippy the dolphin in a long time, but so flipping the vowel, and I like to do it with like a hand signal. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can see my hand. So flipping the vowel just means taking the sound from long to short or short to long. So a student reads the word bread, B-R-E-A-D, as breed. Breed is a word. So they have no reason to think they're incorrect until they finish the sentence and consider if it matches the context or not. But they just learned EA can say long E, so that they were applying it. So you can tell them to flip the vowel. What's the other sound E can make? E can say E, but it can say eh, like short E. So you flip it from E to eh. And doing that with different vowel sounds and different words can help build flexibility in manipulating sounds, but also provide support when students are trying to read a word with a vowel pattern, or even a longer word that has a vowel pattern in one of the word parts that they haven't yet learned or mastered. And sometimes they just need to flip the sound from long to short, and that is enough to help them move on and complete reading the word or move on to the next word. Another thing we can say when students are trying to spell words correctly or read them aloud is reminding them to blend all the way through a word. If you're working with a sophomore in high school, you're probably not going to pull out Stretchy the snake. But if you're working with first grade, you might be familiar with Stretchy the snake. But just teaching students, move the whole way through the word, move the whole way. Kids have a very short attention span. They want to look at the first letter and move on. And reminding them to move the whole way through the word sets them up for success down the road when they're trying to spell and read words on their own, when you're not around to help them. And so the challenge still with these is that if you're trying to spell a word or you're trying to read a word, if it's not in your vocabulary yet, you don't know it, you're not going to know, your approximation at spelling or saying the word. It's not necessarily going to make sense to you if you don't know the word, if you're not familiar with it. So just something to keep in mind. But both of these keep students from reading left to right. The other one I wanted to point out are just other things you can say to help students move the whole way through a word when they're trying to spell it, and they're trying to say all of the sounds out loud, or they're trying to read it. Reminding kids to move through every letter, every sound in the word directs them to use that visual information. They're so quick to try to, use other things to help them figure it out. And this, again, it's going to support them in their flexibility in reading and spelling longer words. And also it will help them make that leap from an approximation of the word to the correct word, because as they're moving through all the sounds, they may hear pieces along the way that give them a clue as to what that word sounds like, if it's in a vocabulary if it's in their vocabulary. So a lot of time people say, I don't know, should I just read the word for them? Should I spell it for them? I mean, sometimes you need to do something so you can keep moving. But if you're continuously having to read words for a student or you're continuously spelling them, that gives you information. And I know that there's a lot of talk in the chat about communication breakdowns, and that can be a challenge. If students are struggling with the materials they have, the reading that they've been given to do independently, the kind of writing that they've been asked to do without, various writing supports, personal dictionaries, or portable word walls, word banks, that kind of thing. That's information to share. Those are supports that you're going to need, so that you can make intentional decisions. Yeah, every once in a while, if you just need to move on, sometimes you just read the word and you move on. But we want to make more intentional decisions whenever we can. Just some other prompts to think about when supporting writing. These are very similar to the questions from earlier. Say more about that. Visualizing. Can you see this in your mind? And zooming in on importance. What does your reader need to know or understand? And then just some helpful prompts for editing for conventions, helping students read their writing aloud and listening to what their voice is doing and connecting what their voice is doing to punctuation marks can be really helpful. All right, I'll pass it off to Marissa.
So for math, we really want to point out kind of the two different errors you can see, which is a processing error versus a computation error. So processing, just really referring to the strategies and the reasoning behind what students are doing, versus computation, really focusing on the end result and that numerical answer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about prompting for both. So error prompts in math for the process. So really math is, we really want to make sure we are focusing on the process and not just the answer. And I know that can be kind of difficult since it's out of your control, again, with the kinds of questions that might be asked to your students. But really focusing on that there are multiple paths and ways to get to a specific place. So just some prompts for you for the process, really emphasizing any previous learnings that your student has had in class, previous years, beginning of the year, and any misconceptions that they might have or any gaps that may need to be filled. So encourage some critical thinking and just letting them know that they can, take a different strategy to get somewhere.
I think I'll just say really quick, I think this is a good one where we were talking earlier about thinking out loud. And some of you said in the chat that you like to model for your students. Because if we think students don't know how to analyze problems or how to identify relevant information, modeling our process out loud for how we find that can be really helpful. They can mirror that.
Yeah, and then just offering that feedback. I know some of you said you really like the like tell me more. What were you thinking during this process? Like, why did you choose this route? And then just promoting that self-reflection, encouraging your students to identify like maybe where they've gone wrong, what they feel like they've done well. Um,
Those are
Sorry,
important ones
just
too.
really quick. Just something big for both computation and process. Do not give students the answer. I know sometimes it can be really difficult, even with like a simple math fact. If they get a math fact wrong, you want to like point out the correct, what it really is. But it is super important that we give kids that thinking time. And if they can't get somewhere, then we use certain strategies to help them. And I'm actually going to go into that in a little bit. I know we're running out of time, so I'll probably be quick. And then for computation, just encourage making connections. So if they can't get a math fact, well, what's your doubles plus one? If they can't do 7 times 6, can they do 6 times 6 and add 6 more? How can they break apart numbers to help them make connections to figure out whatever computation they're trying to do? Using visual tools, those place value charts and number lines, really having students focus on that conceptual understanding and not always focusing on the computation. Promoting persistence, just encourage them to keep trying, try again. We don't want to make them go crazy, but keep trying. We definitely want to promote that. And then just always encourage double checking. And then once again, not giving them the answer. We do not want to do that. Oh, you're muted, Jacqueline.
Sorry, my dog was barking, so I muted myself. Thanks, Marissa. Having students explain their math answers on an assessment is such a challenge. That's a really good situation where you might ask for like sentence frames where students can fill it in. Like I did this, like fill in the blank because blank. Sometimes sentence frames might help. So that's something you could ask a special educator to help you with. Sorry, go ahead, Marissa.
No, you're good. And I think, it's really important, although you're not designing the tasks, that we have an access point for all students. So they all need an entry point to be able to even approach the task at hand. And so if they don't have an entry point or an access point, then we need to help create, like Jacqueline said, we know it's not your job to, design the questions or modify the curriculum. But trying, if you can, to work with your teachers, if hopefully it's open, to get that access point for kids. I'm going to go through this quick. I just want to point out the standard algorithm. So a lot of the standard algorithm is a procedure, and we know it's introduced way too early for kids, and this is what kind of leads to their lack of conceptual understanding, and really just leads to this like procedure and memorization, which is why students struggle so much in math later on. So just pointing out here that the standard algorithms, we know them for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Addition and subtraction are introduced in kindergarten. However, the standard algorithm and the standards isn't introduced until 4th grade. So by teaching them the standard algorithm too early, it's leading, and this is actually on my next slide, it's leading kids to, and you can go to it, have math anxiety and problems in math in the future. So it's a short-term resolution. It's leading to long-term consequences that maybe, paras and teachers in the upper grade levels see in their classrooms. And that's just one part to it. There's more, but and then just if your teachers are teaching the standard algorithm too early, just always encourage your students that to use other strategies. So we put them here, you know, breaking numbers apart, using base 10 blocks, using number lines, however you can to have students really understand how numbers work. And that's going to really help them in the future. Um, Quickly here, some common misconceptions of standards. There's a link there when you get the slide deck, you can click it. For grades K to 8, it just has common misaligned instruction, you know, misconceptions that we may have about standards and how we're teaching them. Obviously, you're not teaching them, but maybe in explaining something, it can help you if you ever read these. And then lastly, rules that expire. I know in the younger grades that a lot of times rules or mnemonic devices or songs or whatever is introduced for students to help remember rules. And it's important to note that these rules expire. And so this is a great article that we linked here. It's 3 or 4 authors. It's from NCTM. Just an example that, you know, I taught 5th and 6th grade, and they're like, you can't subtract a larger number from a smaller number. And well, you can, but you know, they were taught in elementary school that the bigger number has to go on top and the smaller number has to go on bottom. And that's not true. So making sure that we're not contributing to the rules that are going to expire later on.
I love this article. It definitely made me say what a few times. It was really, really interesting. Whoops. All right, so I'll just say, do you have any lingering questions? You can throw them in the chat. But I also want to remind you that this is a lot of information to take in. We gave you a lot of, resources and links and talk through a number of different kinds of prompts, and it's just a lot of information. So if you start thinking through things and processing what we've talked about today, and you have questions, you are welcome to email Marissa. Here, I'll come back to that. You are welcome to email Marissa and I. We are happy to answer your questions that maybe you had during the webinar, didn't get a chance to ask, or questions that you have after the fact. So please make use of those emails if you need them. And the other thing I want to point out is that when you close out today, there'll be a quick survey. We do love feedback because it helps us craft our webinars and presentations and the content and everything that we do here for future opportunities. So please let us know. And our next paraprofessional opportunity is coming up on March 5th, Understanding Second Language Acquisition. And you will get your certificate via email, probably within 48 hours, along with the recording and the slides and all of the resources that go along with it. And so you'll have access to everything so you can review and use these tools as you need. And for those of you who are at schools where you work with teams of teachers a lot, or you have some teachers that have been co-teaching in classrooms, we are putting on a co-teaching institute in June to really support that link between classroom teachers and paraprofessionals. And so be on the lookout for information about that, and hopefully you can join us. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.